Continuing with Chapter 11. I wouldn't want to make it spick and span like a gardener's garden, all clipped and spick and span, would you? He said. It's nicer like this, with things running wild and swinging and catching hold of one another. Oh, don't let us make it tidy, said Mary anxiously. It wouldn't seem like a secret garden if it were tidy. Dickon stood rubbing his rosy red head with a rather puzzled look. It's a secret garden, sure enough, he said, but it seems like someone besides the robin must have been in since it was shut up about 10 years ago. But the door was locked, and the key was buried, said Mary. No one could get in. That's true, he answered. It's a queer place. Seems to me as if there'd been a bit of pruning done in here and there, later than 10 years ago. But how could it have been done? Said Mary. He was examining a branch of the standard rose, and he shook his head. Aye, how could it? He murmured, with the door locked and the key buried. Mistress Mary always felt that however many years she lived, she would never forget the first morning when her garden began to grow. Of course, it did seem to begin to grow for her that morning. When Dickon began to clear places to plant seeds, she remembered what Basil had sung at her when he wanted to tease her. Are there any flowers that look like bells? She inquired. Lilies of the valleys does, he answered, digging away with the trowel, and there's Canterbury bells and campanulas. That's a funny word, isn't it? Campanula. Oh, let's plant some, said Mary. Well, there's lilies of the valleys here already. I saw 'em. They'll have growed too close, and we'll have to separate 'em, but there's plenty. The other ones take 2 years to bloom from seed, but I can bring you some bits of plants from our cottage garden. Why does thou want them? Then Mary told him about Basil and his brothers and sisters in India, and how she had hated them, and of their calling her Mistress Mary quite contrary. They used to dance around and sing at me. They sang, Mistress Mary, quite contrary, how does your garden grow, with silver bells and cockle shells and marigolds all in a row? I just remembered it, and it made me wonder if there were really such flowers like silver bells. She frowned a little, and gave her trowel a rather spiteful dig into the earth. I wasn't as contrary as they were. But Dickon laughed. Ah, he said, and as he crumbled the rich black soil she saw, he was sniffing up the scent of it. There doesn't seem to be no need for no one to be contrary when there's flowers and such and like, and such lots of friendly wild things running around and making home for themselves, or building nests and singing and whistling. Now does there? Mary, kneeling by him holding the seeds, looked at him and stopped frowning. Dickon, she said, you were as nice as Martha, and you were. I like you, and you make the 5th person. I never thought I should like 5 people. Dickon sat up on his heels as Martha did when she was polishing the grate. He did look funny and delightful, Mary thought, with his round blue eyes and red cheeks and happy-looking turned-up nose. Only 5 folks as thou likes, he said. Who's the other 4? Your mother and Martha, Mary checked them off on her fingers. And the robin and Ben Weatherstaff. Dickon laughed as though he was obliged to stifle the sound by putting his arm over his mouth. I know thou thinks I'm a queer lad, he said, but I think thou'rt the queerest little lass as I ever saw. Then Mary did a strange thing. She leaned forward and asked him a question which she had never dreamed of asking anyone before, and she tried to ask it in Yorkshire because that was his language, and in India a native was always pleased when you knew his speech. Does thou like me? She said. Ah, he answered heartily, that I does. I likes thee wonderful, and so does the robin, I do believe. That's 2 then, said Mary, that's 2 for me. And then they began to work harder than ever and more joyfully. Mary was startled and sorry when she heard the big clock in the courtyard strike the hour of her midday dinner. I shall have to go, she said mournfully, and you shall have to go too, won't you? Dickon grinned. My dinner's easy to carry about with me, he said. Mother always lets me put a bit of something in my pocket. He picked up his coat from the grass and brought out a pocket of lumpy little bundle tied up in quite a clean, coarse, blue and white handkerchief. It held 2 thick pieces of bread and a slice of something laid between them. "It's oftenest not but bread," he said, "but I've got a fine slice of fat bacon with it today." Mary thought it looked a queer dinner, but he seemed ready to enjoy it. "Run on and get thy victuals," he said. "Thou'll be done with mine first. I'll get some more work done before I start back home." He sat down with his back against a tree. "I'll call the robin up," he said, "and give him the rind of the bacon to peck at. They likes a bit of fat wonderful." Mary could scarcely bear to leave him. Suddenly it seemed as if he might be a sort of wood fairy who might be gone when she came into the garden again. He seemed too good to be true. She went slowly halfway to the door in the wall, and then she stopped and went back. "Whatever happens, you would never tell," she said. His poppy-colored cheeks were distended with his first big bite of bread and bacon, but he managed to smile encouragingly. "If thou was a mistle thrush, and showed me where thy nest was, dost thou think I'd tell anyone? Not me," he said. "Thou'rt as safe as a mistle thrush." And she was quite sure that she was. That is the end of chapter 11.